I bet there is virtually no one out there who didn't get very frustrated multiple times in their lives by trying to adopt a healthy habit, improve their health, reach a certain, desired destination or goal, and unfortunately dropped out along the way because the process maybe was too painful or not clear enough, or simply they lacked the motivation to sustain the kind of effort that was required to reach that destination. What if I told you there is a much better way to do it, which virtually would guarantee you that you can achieve any kind of goal you want and also enjoy the journey along the way? My name is Adrian Radoy, and I'm very passionate about change and personal transformation. I've been on a personal transformation journey for the past 5 years, and I've been thinking intensely, how can I make this some sort of a formula or a process that I can follow, first of all, in my life from this moment on, and also share it with other people who might struggle with making impactful choices in their lives that would lead to certain desired results in the long term. So, today I'd like to talk to you about three types of change, amongst which I think only one is really sustainable. But we will start with the kind of change that most people are used to and is the least sustainable, right? So we'll talk about action first change. And this is the classical example when you have the New Year's resolution and you want to let's stick to a health goal or fitness goal. And you don't like how you look in the mirror and you think that the New Year's Eve is the right moment for you to make impactful lasting changes that can lead next year to a desired outcome, like you losing, for example, 10 kilograms or adding some muscle. So why this typically fails? Well, it fails because there is no real motivation behind it. You are just offloading the pain of not feeling weak or insecure to a certain decision that the future you will take, and support all the kind of effort that you are not willing to support today. So by taking the decision to go to the gym the next week, or starting with next week, you alleviate the pain that you feel right now of not doing anything about the fact that you are not feeling okay with yourself. But of course, when the time comes and that person, that future you, has to actually go to the gym, that's something which is very difficult to do. Why? Simply because the mind is not used to having this kind of activities, right? Everything is downstream from identity. So you see yourself in a certain way, then you have certain beliefs which reinforce that identity. Those beliefs are simply thoughts and emotions that you regularly feel to enforce the beliefs that you have about yourself. And then those thoughts and emotions, they generate certain actions, right? And those actions lead to certain results. And those results will simply reinforce the kind of beliefs that you have to enforce again more and more the identity that you also have. So if you didn't go to the gym up to that point, it's not enough just to say that I want to lose weight and I want to add some muscle. It's not enough. Why? Because you have the same identity of someone who didn't go to the gym. You have the same beliefs of someone who really doesn't think that actually can do what is required to add some muscle and lose the amount of weight that you simply dreamed of losing or gaining, right, just a week before. When you are basically forced to the execution, to the process itself that would lead to the desired result, your mind will start jumping on you saying, look, this is not who you are. You're just not going to the gym. You're not the kind of person who goes to the gym. You don't have any kind of track record that tells you that you can actually do this. So why bother? Just stay home. Don't care about that. Don't mind that you set this goal a week ago, right? Take it easy. Don't put that pressure on yourself. So because your mind has this kind of inertia of all the thoughts, all the emotions, which confirmed a non-action, if you want, for you, it can easily convince you not to pursue something crazy just because you put yourself a New Year's resolution, right? So the mind has this incredible capacity, on the one side, to give us the comfort that we need in real time to feel good about ourselves, like the reason why you create the New Year's resolutions in the first place, but at the same time, it forces us to conserve energy and stay safe and not do things which are not in the ordinary day as a normal habit. So that's why this kind of action first changes cannot persist, because action is downstream from identity, beliefs, thoughts, emotions, and actions, right? Actions by themselves cannot happen. They can happen actually in the second type of change that I want to talk to you about, but I don't recommend it. I mean, it's not like you all anyway. You might not even be able to avoid it, like it was my case, but that's not ideal, right? The guaranteed way that I talked about at the beginning is related to identity first change. This is how you can actually sustain change, and I will talk a bit more about this specifically. So if you want, ultimately, persistent change and real transformation can only happen if it's sustainable, because transformation is a process that takes years. It's not something that takes 1 week or 1 month. Let's imagine again the action first change that we started to discuss about. Even if you start to go to the gym and even if you lose some weight, ultimately that's still some sort of a superficial change. You will lose some weight because maybe you really want to look good in the summer, right? And that's your motivation. But that's not a strong enough motivation to keep you fit after the summer ends, because you thought about the goal as the destination and everything that mattered. The journey along the way, you simply compromised. You didn't enjoy it, right? So you discounted the pleasure that you could have taken from the journey simply for reaching that goal, which for you was important, right? But that's again not the kind of change that you could easily persist, because you basically what you did these 3 months or 6 months or however you worked in order to reach this kind of, like superficial goal, of looking on the exterior in a certain way to get maybe the appreciation of other people. That's not something that is powerful enough to sustain the kind of change that would lead to you staying fit after the summer ends. I hope it makes sense. So now let's talk about the kind of change that will lead to persistent results if you are lucky. And I will talk specifically today about my situation, right? Um, so people change when they have something aspirational to go to, or they want to simply change the current living conditions, the external circumstances in which they exist. They become so difficult that you have to change, and I call this evolutionary kind of change. So there is like this kind of environmental pressure that forces you to change basically, and you cannot go around it. You cannot not change, because this is the only way that you can still survive. It was my case when I was confronted with a very deep personal crisis in my life, which ultimately forced me to go very deep within. And this is the kind of change that I call behavior first change, right? So, in behavior first change, the kind of motivation that you have is run away from motivation, which means that my current circumstances are so dire, are so overwhelming that I have to run away from them, right? So typically, pain is the main motivator. Um, so it's also like a reactive goal, right? Ultimately, if I don't want necessarily to reach a certain destination or to reach a goal. I simply want to avoid staying in this current situation, right? But if you think about it, this is something that ultimately is not sustainable, because by staying in this kind of tense situation, you cannot really live like that for long, right? And once the personal crisis goes away, typically you tend to default to the kind of level of comfort or stagnation that you were in before. It was not my case. I was lucky enough to introduce this kind of identity first change when I transformed myself through behavior first. So by the need of escaping external circumstances, I discovered myself and I liked what I discovered ultimately, even if it was like a huge struggle along the way and it took like years and years. Then I discovered that actually I can do something with what I learned along the way. And I started to create different kind of goals. And now let's talk a bit about goals, right? So if you want to achieve a certain goal, you have in my opinion, there are two kinds of goals. This is how I classified them for myself. It's a forced goal or a powerful goal. What does it mean, a forced goal? Basically, let's say you are not in a personal crisis, you are not in pure survival mode, where you would not anyway be available to any kind of advice, you would not have, you would not be interested in watching this kind of videos. You would have to change by the nature of the environmental pressure. But let's say you are simply more or less in a comfortable situation, but slipping into some sort of a personal crisis. It's like the frog in the boiling water, right? You stayed enough there, and you know that if you continue like this, at some point the pain will start to exacerbate, will become bigger and bigger. You would not like yourself more and more with each passing day, and you are interested in making a change to actually, alleviate the building pressure and the building pain that you start to feel in your life. So in this case, the goal that you can set for yourself is indeed, let's say, to lose 10 kilograms. Um, but it's somehow a forced goal, right? It's not something aspirational. You simply want to not feel like you're feeling now, right? So basically, the goal becomes your number one priority as the life vest for taking you away from the pain that you are currently experiencing. But the journey itself is rather painful. You don't necessarily enjoy it, right? You simply created this goal for yourself because you know that it will alleviate the kind of pain and pressure that you feel in the moment. So the motivation is also typically external, right? Maybe someone made fun of you, right? Maybe someone made a comment that created this kind of anger in you with them, with yourself, that you are not where you should be, and you simply now have to make something to change that, right? So this is, some sort of the motivation behind this kind of goals is to alleviate past, present pain, and you focus on the goal, which is in the future, but the focus on the goal is to simply escape the past and present conditions, to alleviate pain. It's not something that you really enjoy. The process of reaching the goal is not something that you enjoy. So the effort is burdensome, right? It's not something that fills you up. You don't wake up each morning thinking, yes, now I have to go to the gym or I have to eat healthy, because this is, how I want to live my life. No, you're like, I have to go to the gym, I have to eat more healthy because I have to lose weight, because I have to prove that guy or that girl or that person or whoever that I am worthy of their appreciation and I can do it. And I am just like filled up with this kind of frustration and energy and negative energy, if you want, which deep down that is not something that you can keep in your life for the longest time. This is not sustainable, if you want. Okay. And in terms of energy, I think about it as like fossil fuel, right? Like gasoline, or I don't know, petrol, or anything that you take from the ground and it's limited. um, like this kind of fossil fuel, it burns intense, it burns fast, but it's not sustainable, right? It's not something that you can just enjoy doing for the rest of your life. Imagine that, imagine that you want to prove someone wrong. Would you want to be in that state for the remaining time of your life and be guided and be driven by that kind of negative energy just to prove someone that you can achieve things? No, ideally, you don't want to do that. You don't want to rely that much on external motivation. You don't want to rely on the kind of energy which doesn't make your life better on a day-to-day basis. That's the point. So this kind of, we discussed about action first change, which is not sustainable, right? In terms of energy, um, I think of action first fuel, like, just matches. Like you just burn some matches, and those the energy released by the matches gives you some burst of energy. Like when you think about making a New Year's resolution, yes, I know I'm motivated, and tomorrow I will start, right? But matches don't give you too much energy, right? They drain very fast, and you need a lot of matches to just maintain that motivation. And it's not something that can lead to persisted years long change, to real kind of transformation. Behavior first, also we saw that, if you are forced into a certain personal crisis, that will lead to immediate change. But how do you transition from that kind of immediate change that you can see because of this environmental pressure into something that is sustainable, into something that will lead to you actually enjoying your life? Because this is the whole goal. This is the goal of my channel in the end, to talk about the kind of change that would lead to a transformation, to growth, but in a way which doesn't rob you away from simply enjoying, the joys of life, and being available for your friends and family, and doing things without this kind of pressure on yourself to achieve a certain destination, just to be able to alleviate some pain and some pressure, right? This is what I care about, and this is what I've been thinking and developing for myself for the past 5 years, right? Since when I started to change because of my crisis, I knew that this is not sustainable. But because I was forced to change for a long enough time period, I saw positive results that I didn't want to lose. So now, how I think about change is, first we change the identity, right? And this is, of course, not something very intuitive to do if you don't have a process behind. And this is my current focus. This is what I try to build for myself, and to be able to explain it to people in a way that is not overly complicated. Because identity is something that we take for granted. We see ourselves in a certain way, we conduct ourselves according to the perceptions of others about ourselves, about how we think that others perceive us, who we are in society, and the narratives that we tell about ourselves, which create these kind of beliefs, which in turn generate certain thoughts and emotions and actions and behavior that looks familiar to people, right? When we go and visit a friend, even if we didn't see him for 10 years, if he's a close friend, then he more or less recognizes us without having to inspect us too much. They recognize a certain habit, a certain, thinking pattern, a certain speaking pattern, a certain type of joke. So the change is limited in that kind of interaction. There has to be some sort of a pattern of activity, of behavior, that can be recognizable by the other person. Because if we would change dramatically, 180 degrees overnight, people will not recognize us. And that's also not sustainable for human beings who live in communities and you know want to feel included. However, there is this idea of using or seeing your identity as something not very static, but rather fluid. And this comes with increasing, if you want, the level of your consciousness, and not attaching that much to your ego identity, if you want. What does it mean, ego identity? Well, my name, my status, my relationships, my assets, my possessions, my worldly assets, if you want. This is something that we think defines us. If you ask someone, who are you? They will tell you their name, they will tell you what they do for a living, they will tell you who they know, they will tell you, I don't know, their passions and this kind of stuff. So we have this concept of an ego, right, which is a superficial, false identity that our brain develops to allow us to behave in a predictable way in society and with other people. And typically, this ego gets more and more developed as we age, But the problem is that it attaches to everything that we get to possess along the way in our development. So I buy a car, now it's my car, right? Whatever that means. Or I buy a house, that's my house. Yes, but ultimately it's not really my house, right? I have some papers, some documents which tell me that this belongs to me, while I'm alive. But ultimately, what does it mean to possess something? It's something very, very difficult to articulate, right? But this feels so palpable. This becomes all the things that we possess in our lives, they become attached to us as an identity. And you can imagine, like a very simple example, if you have a car and someone scratches your car, it's not like you are, you know, um, like you don't care about that, right? You don't just keep your a poker face, no matter how little you care about the car, right? There are people who care about the car maybe more than other family members, right? And I know someone in when I was little and I was living in Romania. I know someone who had a car that he loved so much that he basically for sure cared more about the car than about anyone else. I mean, it had to be like that, right? So imagine that if someone just scratches your car, you will feel this huge emotional tension, and you cannot just stay there and watch someone scratching your car without doing something about it. It's your car, right? It's as if he did damage to you, to your image, to your identity. It disrespected you, right? Because he knew, and you start creating these narratives. He knew me, and this is why he did it. This is not good, right? He's a bad guy. Whatever. I will go, to the police. So you will start all these kind of narratives which are supported by this ego identity that we get to develop, which allows us to act and behave in a community, in society. Imagine that you would see someone, scratching the car of another person. Would you react the same way? No, right? What's the difference between the car of another person and your car? Except some documents, some paper, nothing much, right? That's not much of a difference. Okay, you might say, okay, I have emotional attachments to, you know, situations or experiences that I got to live in the car while going towards certain destinations and so on. Okay, true, but ultimately it's still an object, right? That car is still an object. Everything that we possess ultimately in life are objects, right? So when I talk about identity first change, I want you to think that who you see yourself to be and the stories that you tell yourself about who you are ultimately self created. I'm not saying that they are delusions, but they are as real as any other story that you can tell um, about yourself for yourself in your own mind. And because identity is the source of everything, um, we should see this identity as being something which is changeable, to the point of it being fluid. If you want to really achieve anything in life, the easiest way to do it is to change your identity, to find someone who already achieved that kind of thing, and to model the behavior of that person and the mindset. So what are the stories, the beliefs that that person must have in order to reach that destination, and also ultimately adopt the identity of that person. Because if you would be, imagine this, it's a simple analogy, right? It's a simple mind exercise. If you would be that person who achieved whatever, if you would be them, if you would adopt that identity, if you would run in your mind the same beliefs, the same thoughts, the same emotions, if you would generate the same kind of actions and you would have the same kind of results, and you would develop the same kind of behaviors on a day to day basis as the person who achieves a certain outcome, wouldn't you achieve also the same thing? What would be the difference then? There would be no difference. So the thing is that if you change the identity, if you change your identity, which doesn't, it's anyway not something that has to be fixed. We keep it fixed because we want to have this kind of familiarity in our lives. We want things to be in a certain way that we can recognize. But that's the mind, that's the brain's default mode of operation of having to anticipate things to be in a certain way. The brain doesn't like surprises that much. Of course, if it's a if it's a good surprise, if it's a nice surprise, you get a dopamine spike, and you get rewarded by discovering something nice. But ultimately, we don't want too much change in our lives. We want things to be the same way because they are predictable. They are not threatening. We can anticipate things to be in a certain way by simply expecting them to be in the way that we find them familiar to us. But let's think a bit about how you can actually achieve long lasting transformation and powerful change and adopt healthy habits that will always stay with you. The only sustainable way is to adopt this kind of view of who you are, of changing your identity, of making your identity fluid, right? Because if you think about life, life is simply a process. And we are also transforming each day, even if we don't see it in the mirror on a day-to-day basis, but we see it from a year to another year, from one decade to another decade. So the process of change is inevitable, but we tend to think about it as something that it's outside of our control. And yeah, we just go with the flow, right? This is what we say, go with the flow of life, which is true in a way. And we always go with the flow. We cannot go outside the flow because we are part of life itself. And because we are part of life, we are always flowing with life. So that's a given. But if we make this process more conscious, what can we get out of it? Well, we can get out of it the kind of outcome that we consciously design for ourselves. We can create for ourselves the kind of reality that we want, that we imagine ultimately, right? So let's imagine that you are not interested to lose weight only to look good in the summer, but you want to become a healthy person and stay healthy for the remaining of your days, so your family gets the most out of you, and your kids get to enjoy a parent who is healthy, who is fit, who is able to play with them and be always around them, right? This is a different goal than I just need to lose this weight so they don't laugh about me, or they don't make jokes of my weight anymore, right? It's a different kind of motivation. It's a go towards motivation for identity first change, right? Which I call them powerful goals. So you have behavior first change, and there are forced goals. I have to do something in order to alleviate this kind of present past tension. Um, is reactive. But in the case of powerful goals, I am doing things because I want to achieve an aspirational state in the future. I want to get healthy and stay healthy. It's a different kind of game, if you want. In a forced goal, you have a finite gain. The goal in itself is the alleviation. This is what you want to reach, and you discount the journey for the destination because you think that the destination will give you what you want. In case of a powerful goal, which is identity first, kind of, the goals that you can reach by changing your identity, you have like go towards motivation. You don't want to remove the pressure of the current circumstance. You simply want to enjoy the process of staying healthy and everything along the way. And by the nature of the process, you also get to lose weight, of course. But the attitude is different and the intention is different, right? This kind of powerful goals are aspirational, are not painful, are not pain driven, right? It's go towards motivation. It's something that you want to achieve in the future. And it's also, like in the case of powerful goals, the journey becomes the destination in itself. You don't care that much about when you will lose a certain weight. You will enjoy the process of being healthy, of staying fit, of eating well, of doing exercise, just because you like how you feel about yourself when you are by yourself, or how good you can be, how more present can you be with the people you love by the simple fact that you feel good about yourself and you don't have these narratives in your mind telling you that you should do this, you should do that, you should do this. You become friends with your mind if you want, right? So also powerful goals are aligned with the flow of life, right? Identity, if it's fluid, because life is fluid and life is a process of continuous transformation, by adopting this kind of identity first mindset, we become fluid. We become consciously in flow with life by adjusting our identity along the way in order to become the type of person who achieves a certain goals, right? So the process here for achieving goals is not I have to do this nasty thing, I have to go on this effort in order to reach something which is not sustainable, it's a negative energy, it's like an external motivation, and it transforms to internal motivation, right? Where the process of becoming is the most important thing. The goal in itself is not the main priority. The goal is there only to give you direction. The main priority is the journey, right? Actually be able to enjoy the journey, because the journey is 99.999% anyway, right? Life is a journey, life is a process, life is a process of becoming, right? We cannot rush goals, we cannot rush destinations, because ultimately, we know what happens when we reach the end of the journey, right? You just leave the planet. And even though we know that this is something that we should not rush, we are still discounting life and living fully for the promise, for the shallow promise of a future goal, which we think will alleviate the pressure that we feel in our day, in our lives, right? So by not being attached that much to how you look today, to what you have in terms of worldly possessions, by detaching a bit from this kind of ego identity, you get to have an identity which is fluid, which allows you to progress, which allows you to grow, which allows you to become the type of person who can achieve the goals that you set for yourself. And the good thing is that by the time you reach the goal, you would have transformed in a way that is sustainable. And you would have enjoyed the journey up to that point. That's the beautiful thing about identity first change and about powerful goals or purposeful goals, right? It's not something that you do only to reach the destination. Because imagine that if you only do something to reach the destination, what do you do after, right? What do you do after the summer ends? Are you still motivated to keep yourself fit and healthy and eat nice? Maybe, but you would start maybe from January or February, some months before the next summer, and so on and so on and so on, and stay in that cycle of negative energy, pressure, external expectations from you, um, instead of just deciding for yourself that this is something that you want to sustain independent on any kind of external pressures. And I was talking about fossil fuel in when I talked about forced goals, which are not sustainable, which leads to burnout, which is not enjoyable, are not enjoyable. And I thought a lot about the kind of fuel that this kind of purposeful goals and identity-based change requires. And the analogy that I made here for myself is like a nuclear fuel, right? Which is inexhaustible, which is something that, you know, always burns. And it's an inner fuel. It doesn't come from external motivation. It's something that you generate. It's like a star. So a star generates tremendous energy for billions and billions of years because of this incredible balance between the pressure, the gravitational pressure, which the gravitational pressure caused by the mass of the star, and then um, because the pressure is so huge at the core of the star, the atoms, the hydrogen atoms and then the helium atoms, they fuse together, and they cause a nuclear fusion, which releases tremendous amount of energy. But this energy is self-sustainable. It's something that is generated from within the star. The star doesn't need external motivation to run and give us sunlight for billions of years. This is something self-sustainable. And the analogy can even be extended a bit more here, because the star is experiencing external pressure, right? So there is this kind of always having to be challenged in a way, right? The gravity is pulling, it's forcing it to collapse on itself, if you want. But because this nuclear reaction from the core are so powerful, they're basically resisting the gravitational pressure, and it's keeping the star in more or less a steady state for the longest time. And this is also what we can experience with ourselves. If we are not challenging ourselves, if we are just living a very comfortable life and we don't know what we are capable of, we cannot generate this kind of pressure for ourselves to have this kind of nuclear energy, this kind of inner strength, this kind of generative fuel that we can build for ourselves, if we are not pressuring, if we are not testing ourselves, right? If life is too comfortable, then of course you don't need any kind of pressure, but you also cannot expect any kind of transformation. So you have to find a way, if you really want to transform, if you really want to have outcomes and results that you can be proud of, you have to think of a sustainable way to transform your life, to always grow, but enjoy the ride along the way. To be able to grow, to be able to always evolve, which is by default a difficult thing to do. How can you do it without burning out? How can you do it while enjoying the journey? It's a very difficult thing to do, but this is what I came up with myself up to this point. And I will take a lot more time to crystallize further and further this kind of concepts and help to the best of my abilities people who are in this kind of comfortable situation, maybe stagnating a bit, but knowing that if they don't do anything, like if they don't do like a shift in their lives, they will simply remain in a stagnation mode and comfortable place, and use only matches from time to time as fuel to try to do some action based change, right? To do something because they know they should do it, but they don't find the real fuel to drive this kind of change and lead ultimately to a habit that can be implemented and lead to a healthier life, or a more fulfilling life, or improve their relationships with themselves, with others, of building the career they want in life, or anything, right? So this is my passion. um, there are a lot of concepts that I have to discover and integrate, and then explain it to others, which is a very beautiful challenge, because I think it's worthwhile. And I know the truth behind everything I've talked to you about, because I applied it for myself. And I am passionate, and I have so much energy about putting this out there and talking to you about this kind of change, because I know it works. I also know it's not easy, but in my opinion, it's the only real sustainable way to become the best capable version of yourself, and also enjoying the journey along the way, transforming continuously and not losing the joy of life, pursuing goals, but not for the sake of the goal itself, but for being able to actually stay in the process and enjoying the journey for the longest time possible. This is what I try to do with these videos, and I will not stop until I will make this as clear as possible and as concise as possible for people who might require this kind of support. So if you are one of the few people who stayed up to this point in this clip, I really want to thank you. This is for me, very purposeful, this kind of activity. I really love it. And if you think that I can help with anything, if you would like some personalized support, or you want to go deeper in any kind of topics related to the discussion of today, please feel free to reach out. You have a link in the description, and you can book a free call, and we can discuss about your specific situation, and I will do my best to help. So until next time, enjoy everything you do.